by God. The potential, the process of becoming. It doesn't happen overnight. So how have you, in your experience, worked through that process of refining?
Yeah, when I think of refinement, I think mostly of gems, right? And in diamonds, and how you're refined, it comes through a process and a journey. And that's life, right? And we're all from different places and different experiences. And so my process of refinement has really been unlearning a lot of the things that I think I was taught and told maybe to be. When you grow up, I grew up in South Carolina, and so in the Midwest as well. So I grew up in different places, and I just began adjusting to kind of what was normal and what was comfortable. And I started going through a journey where God was really calling me for more and saying, well, Casey, who did I create you to be as an individual, rather than who are you as it relates to serving others, right? And so the closer you get to the refining process, that journey of clarity and of God really saying, this is who I called you to be. These are the special gifts and talents that you have. That's the refining process. And I feel like it's one that goes over time. You never really arrive to the point of, full refinement. But things do get clearer the closer and closer you get to God within that.
Well, and I love your point, because it is a process of becoming as a person, as an individual, the character. And we're not human doers, right? We're human beings.
Yes.
And he wants to reveal who we are in Christ. So in that journey, and you've mentioned it's been a process over years, maybe you could highlight for the group an experience where God has just refined, and how did you work through that to achieve God's outcome?
Yeah, I think mostly the refining process was like, there's this moment where you have to decide as a person of faith if this is the faith of yourself, or if it's the faith of your parents or your friends or your neighbors. And I often think back to being in college my senior year, and I was really going into my senior year, and I had this idea of what my life would be. I really had a vision of being a speaker. In fact, when I was 8, I introduced my dad in an event, and a mentor, she wasn't my mentor at the time, but she was like, Casey, you could do this. You could be a speaker. And I thought she was crazy. And then in college, she would tell me the same thing. And I'm like, who would listen to me, right? But I did know that using my voice was going to be a really big part of my life. And so I thought, I had done pageantry for years. So I thought, okay, I know exactly how I'm going to create the life that I want. And it's through gaining this position on campus at my university. And so I felt like God had told me this. Like, it was one of booming voice, like, God did this, he's telling me this. I had peace throughout the whole process. And then, to my surprise, I did not get the position. And some people would think that that's like really vain, that I was upset and crying over not winning a pageant. But for me, it was like a denial of who I was, right? Because I put so much effort and emphasis in what people thought about me and how I presented myself. And so that felt like a door that was shut, and it was a door that was shut not only for me in that moment, but for my purpose. So I was really struggling through that journey, and eventually one of my mentors in college called me, and she's like, Casey, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I need to graduate because, the money runs out. And she goes, okay, well, I think that you should either, study abroad. You need to do something and get a new perspective. So I ended up studying abroad, and that was an incredible journey of how God even provided the financing for that. But I went on that journey, and that was where God said, I needed to pull you aside, and I needed to grow you, and I needed to refine you, so that when I came back to campus, not only was I more clear about who I was as an individual, but I also had this moment. I am a part of a sorority, and I was getting ready to go out, and now I'm back on campus after being away for a semester, and I went back out, and I had this thought of, oh gosh, in our community, being in a sorority is it's a big deal, and then people will basically challenge you, like, how much do you know, right? It's just kind of a cultural thing. And I remember thinking, oh, I feel like I should brush up on some stuff. Like, if I'm going to put on the letters, I need to make sure that I represent that well. And immediately God checked me and said, if you were to put on the letters of, your sorority, and you're so clear about that, how clear would people be to know that you're a Christian? Like, if you put on the letters of Christ, if you say that you're a believer, what does that look like? And would people actively be able to tell by the way you live your life? So all that to say, that really started my journey of faith and understanding I need to know what it looks like to be a believer. And so I started reading the Bible and getting in community with people and learning to kind of hone in on the voice of God. So that was my journey of refinement and the starting point of what that looked like. So it started with a closed door that ultimately ended up opening the door for me not only to write the book, but also to travel and speak and to do exactly what God said, just not via the vehicle, which I thought.
And it is a life of obedience. Being refined by God is a choice and decision at every turn. And I love this quote by Rick Warren that says this: spiritual maturity, it's neither instant nor automatic. It's gradual, it's progressive. And the development that is the outcome, it will take the rest of your life. So it's an opportunity of various decisions. That was that decision, and yet God in each season of time will give us other opportunities. Will we obey him, his voice, or will we obey the voice or influence or maybe the peer pressure of others? So in this journey of becoming, which is quite a long process, I want to encourage one another as we unpack a few more questions. Think about your role and your part in that lifelong journey of becoming. And it is different. Growth and maturity are two different things. How would you define the two for you?
Yeah. So growth and maturity it's interesting because often we use them interchangeably. But when I'm thinking of growth, I'm thinking, well, number one, I am a budding plant mom. The pun is included there. And as a budding plant mom, I am learning what it looks like to care for something that can't tell you I'm thirsty, right? And so I can see that when I water and when I take care of my plants, that there is growth. So it's a continuous process. Rather, when you think about maturity, it's almost like, okay, well, you've gotten there. Like you've capped out at the maturity in a specific way or in a specific place. So I think of growth as this ongoing journey and maturity as something that you gain, maybe like wisdom, right? Where you gain, but there still is a little bit of a cap of what maturity looks like. So I'm constantly, especially as I'm coaching women and even talking to friends, is that we want to constantly have a growth mindset. And having that growth mindset is being open to hearing from different perspectives and being open to gather new information and challenge maybe old mindsets and understand that growth is this journey that you never truly arrive, but it's when you have the mind of Christ, and the mind of Christ means that it's constantly renewing. So every single day we are granted new mercies, but also we have an opportunity to renew our mind, to take those thoughts captive, the negative thoughts, and continue to grow.
And I was interested by this podcast I listened to this week, and it was talking about how a tree has these growth suckers. That's what they're called. It pulls away from the fruit. To me, that's the maturity, the character that God is wanting to bring about, but it pulls away that critical energy. So growth isn't always essential to reach that outcome. And I really appreciate just the encouragement you brought forth too, Casey, renewing your mind. Because sometimes you're not even aware of certain areas that have just started growing that might need to be cut off. And God's word is just that. It's a sword. And as you surrender to God and allow that refinement through counsel, and I love how you have just surrendered yourself to just the wisdom of others to coach you along, so you in turn can coach. Think about this thought. God is far more interested in building our character than anything else. And he is far more interested in what you do, or who you are, than what you do. As you think about just some final takeaways from today's topic of being refined by God, what would you want to leave with those that are watching us today?
Yeah. When we think of refinement and being refined by God, as I mentioned before, growth is this constant process and this constant evolution. And so I always tell people that you never get to a point where you can stop growing. So no matter where you are in your life, you still have the opportunity to influence others. You still have the opportunity to impact others. You still have things to do, work to do. And that was a lot of the premise of the book that I ended up writing, which is Dream, Build, Repeat. And I found that along my journey, I was held back most often by fear and by insecurity and what will people say and what will happen if I step out in faith and do this thing. So it's necessary to begin to have the vision and say, God, give me a vision, give me an idea, give me a perspective, and then to have the boldness to actually do it, and to have the boldness to actually get up when you feel uncomfortable, when you feel like you don't want to do this work anymore because it's not yielding the results that you want. Pressing in and continuing on that journey and building. But then ultimately, this was the part that I ended up speaking at an event a few years ago. And there were multiple demographics in the room. And I felt a little bit insecure about it because I said, who am I to tell these people anything, right? And at the end of the event, there were so many women that said, hey, I have recently retired and I wasn't sure what my next step was. Or I've been retired for years and didn't think that I had any value to give other people. And so they were so encouraged by the fact that I told them that they had the opportunity to dream again. And that was really the ultimate, how I came to the full conclusion of Dream, Build, Repeat, because not only do you have one vision that God gives you, but he's a multiplier, right? Yes. And so by the time that you accomplish that one thing, he's like, okay, what are you going to do now? Yes. And so you get to dream again, and you get to expand that vision again, you get to build again, and you get to do that process over and over again. So for those that are wondering what's next for my life in this season, I would really encourage you to really get before God and pray and lean into those things that maybe you had those ideas years ago or months ago or however long ago that keeps kind of poking in your mind of I think this would be interesting, or I think I'm interested in exploring this, and really leaning into that and seeing what God does, because God, like I said, he just breathes on something and just multiplies it. So I love that. And even being here, Cindy, and seeing your ministry and see how you show up, it's like you say yes, and God just draws the people, and God draws the experiences and the growth and all of that. So my encouragement is to dream, build, repeat, and do the process over again.
Well, you heard it today. And so let me leave you with this as we wrap up. God's purpose is to make us more like him before he takes us on into heaven, right? So it's a journey that just keeps on going, right? And this is the greatest of privileges, to walk out this life that he has for us, to discover, to be willing to allow this creative God to just guide and direct our every step. And he will bless and prosper if we are willing and will surrender and walk it out by faith. And then with that, it is our immediate responsibility. Just, I hear and obey. It's a choice. It's a decision. And when we make that choice, we will reach the ultimate destiny that he has for us. A destiny that is far over anything we could even think or imagine. I want to encourage you with these words today. As we wrap up our Facebook Live, thank you for joining us. If you want to learn more about Casey, we'll have some information for you, especially about her book. And I do encourage you to look that up and consider that as a Christmas gift. But in the meantime, I just want to encourage you to soul search and allow God to awaken to dream again and allow him to reveal the plans that he has for you that are beyond what you could ever even imagine. Good day. Thanks again.